Hello, Reading. Are you ready for Hillary? Are you really ready for Hillary? Do you want a woman as president? How about Donald Trump? Oh, no way, no how. Well, let's make Hillary the president. What do you want in a president? Somebody that knows what they're actually doing? Do you want somebody with experience in government? Somebody that knows the United States Senate? Do you want somebody that knows the international community? That actually respects other people? Do you want somebody that really wants to control nuclear weapons? How about somebody that's actually negotiated? And all right, how about somebody that is ready to be President of the United States? So, you're ready for Hillary. You know you're ready for Hillary. And here we are in Northern California, ready for Hillary as it should be. Also, are you ready for the 42nd President of the United States? The man gave me a job. You got to love somebody that gives you a job. He said, hey, would you like to be Deputy Secretary of the United States Department of Interior? And I said, working for you? Any day, anytime, always. So here we go. We're going to hear from the 42nd President of the United States. Pretty clear that he knows who is going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. They have some serious years together, right? So, let me introduce to you the 42nd President of the United States, President Bill Clinton.
Hello. Thank you. Well, hello. Thank you, Shasta. Thank you, Reading College. Look at these signs here. Bill for First Lady. Sounds good to me. First of all, thank you for coming. And thank you for supporting Hillary. I want to thank, beginning with my friend John Garamendi. Many of you know, in addition to being a member of Congress now and serving with great distinction and being a state elected official in California, he was the Deputy Secretary of the Interior when I was president. And we set aside more land in perpetuity for the American people than any president since Theodore Roosevelt. And so I thank him. I want to thank Mayor MacArthur for making me feel welcome. Thank you to our Democratic County Chair, Rob Rowan. Thank you, Bob Mulholland and Jane Dolan. And thank you to the Labor Council Chair, Lowell Yarian. Thank you for being here. You know, I said the Teddy Roosevelt thing for two reasons. One is he's the last truly progressive Republican president. And secondly, 113 years ago, he came here to give a speech. And this is what he said. He was talking about what makes a good citizen and a good leader. And he said, the only quality worse than hardness of heart is softness of head. Now, we've had a little bit of both in this election season already. But I want to be serious a minute. On my mother's side, I'm Irish, and some of you may remember that when I was president, I was heavily involved in the Irish peace process, which we were able to succeed with and end a very long conflict in Northern Ireland. But this is the 100th anniversary of Irish independence from the UK. And the symbol of that was Easter Sunday, 1916, when there was an uprising in Dublin. When the Irish Declaration of Independence was issued, it was 486 words long. It mentioned women 3 times. This was a year before women had the vote in America. They said, we're building an equal society of men and women, of people without regard to religion, people without regard to where they come from. It was full of hope and beauty. But when it was issued in 486 words, there were 485 dead people lying in the streets of Dublin because of the fight for independence, against the carnage of World War I. And the great Irish poet William Butler Yeats wrote a line in his poem, Easter 1916, which captures a lot of the road rage we have seen in this election in both parties. Too long a sacrifice can make a stone of the heart. So I think we should begin by acknowledging that a lot of the anger and the feeling that the political system, the economic system has failed, has its roots in the received experience of the American people, 80% of whom have not gotten a pay raise since the crash 8 years ago. And median family income, believe it or not, the one in the middle, is lower than it was the day I left office. So, all over the world you see this. I know Mr. Trump is more, what's the most anodyne word I can use, more colorful than a lot of candidates in other countries, but all over the world, people are screaming because of declining middle-class incomes, rising inequality, reduced social mobility, and a feeling that the borders behind which they live have no security. So in Europe, you got the largest refugee crisis since World War II. And in Austria, a country that you would think is ripe for being an outreaching country, embracing diversity, they're small, they have an unemployment rate of about 4%, they have a wonderfully diverse economy with good agriculture, good industry, great tourism. They just voted by only a half a point for a president committed to a world of bridges, not walls. All over the world, people are fighting these battles. And therefore, one thing I'd like to say to you, not as Hillary's husband, but as a former president, is that every American citizen this time has to think about the presidential election in terms of how it will affect you and your family, your children, your grandchildren, your community, your state, but also what's going to happen in the rest of the world. If we choose a future economy instead of an imagined past, and make no mistake about it, make America great again is saying, I'll make it the way it used to be. Now, for half the American people, it wasn't so great. Where I come from, in the American South, it wasn't so great. It wasn't so great for women in the workforce. It wasn't so great for a lot of things. And not only that, you can't make the economy the way it used to be. So we're making a decision. Are we going to make America great in 21st century terms by reducing inequality, restoring upward mobility, raising incomes, and putting everybody on a good escalator to the future? Or are we going to try to recover an imagined past, which is another way of saying we're going to fight with each other over a shrinking pie? Or are we going to choose a future where we live together or where we act like our differences are all that matters? And are we going to treat the rest of the world with bridges or walls? Should the bridges have some security checks when we're worried? Of course they should. But there's a lot of difference in a bridge with security checks and walls. I also don't think you can build a world with walls. And I'd like to say this. I mean, we could build that wall across the Mexican border that the Republican nominee wants to build. We're in Northern California now. Heck, we could build a wall across the Canadian border. There are a lot of foreigners up there in Canada. We're laughing, but be serious here. We could build a great seawall up and down the Pacific. By now, we're in a deep recession. Then we could build a seawall in the Atlantic. By now, we're in full-blown depression. But there's still a little bit open in America. We'll send the whole U.S. Navy to the Gulf of Mexico. Then we'll put every plane the Air Force has in the air to make sure no one can land here. You still can't keep out the social media, which is why I've been very proud of Hillary for saying, we need Muslim Americans who love freedom and hate terror to help us win the battles of hearts and minds over the internet so we can go forward together. And so here's my pitch. I come here, yes, as a biased but highly well-informed observer. I'm the only person here who's known my candidate since the spring of 1971, 45 years ago. And I also know something about this job and what it takes to produce peace and prosperity and shared prosperity. I would never recommend anything that I thought would hurt my country. And our family has been blessed, and whatever happens, we're going to leave this earth with more good fortune than 99.999% of the people who ever lived. This election's about you and the future of this country. And here's what I think. I think there are three reasons that Hillary should be president. One, I think she has the right values. I think we want to have an America where we grow together, where we live together, and where we're citizens together. An America focused on the future we can build together, not on a past we can't recover. An America focused on shared prosperity, not fighting over a shrinking pie. An America that builds bridges to other people and wins the battle over what kind of future we're going to have, saying our differences matter, they make life interesting, but our common humanity matters more. Now, that's what I believe. Everything flows from that. I have worked for 12 years as a governor, 8 years as president, 15 years in my foundation trying to help people make a living, kids get an education, people have health care, reduce inequalities, and increase upward mobility all over the world. Here's what I know. Everywhere people are working together, good things are happening. Everywhere they spend all their time fighting and crawling all over each other and demonizing and debasing each other, good things are not happening. As far as I know, there are no exceptions. So she should also be elected, secondly, because I think she's got the best ideas for having us grow together. And let's just look at a couple of them. First of all, given the state of the economy, we're growing faster than any other big economy in the world. We've had 15 million new jobs in the last 5 years. We have 90% of our people with health insurance for the first time in the history of the country. We have the youngest, most diverse workforce of any big economy in the world, the best science and technology base, the best capacity to generate energy from the sun and the wind of any country, the best ability to deal with the challenge of climate change and preserve our natural resources, including your water in California. But wages are stagnant, inequality is rising, mobility is stuck. How can we grow together? What is the role of the national government? First, to make investments in a modern infrastructure that includes more than roads and bridges, ports and airports, but universal access to rapid broadband in rural America. Clean water pipes all over America where there are children with elevated lead levels in their blood, so every kid can have a future. Second, a serious commitment to win the race with Germany and China to become the clean energy superpower of the world. Now, when I say that in California, a lot of people say, well, what do you expect? He's in California. But guess what state is number 2 in the deployment of solar panels today? New Jersey. New Jersey, where I was yesterday. I was in eastern Kentucky at the base of the Appalachians in the heart of coal country the other day at Morehead State. And guess what? It's one of the space agency, NASA's partners in nanotechnology, which means they put tiny little computers with huge power into now many satellites. I held satellites, just like those big communication satellites, in my hand. They cost $1 million. The big communication satellites cost $400 million. These will do most of the same work. They're being made by American undergraduates. So I saw this young man jamming in the nanotechnology, and he knew that when I was president, I spent $500 million of your tax money to start researching this. So he thanked me, and I noticed he was putting all this computing power for this tiny satellite into a little box about 1 1/4 inch cubed. So I said, "What's the box made of?" He looked and smiled. He said, "Tungsten does real well in outer space." 19-year-old guy. I said, "Well, where'd you get it?" He said, "I made it here with a 3D printer." And then he smiled and he said, "Mr. President, don't let them make fun of Hillary when she says we're going to put up 500 million solar panels in the next 4 years." He said, "Within a couple of years, we're going to be making these things with 3D printers. They'll be cheap as dirt. They'll be on every house in America, and we'll all be free and have lots of jobs." So, third thing we need to recognize is that we can bring manufacturing back to America, but it won't be like it used to be. One of the reasons Hillary did so much better than all the pundits thought she would in New York and Ohio was that they believed in a modern mixed economy with modern manufacturing. They didn't believe we could pull up the walls and make things the way they used to be. They wanted to make it the way it's going to be. What do I mean by that? Labor costs are no longer the major factor in modern manufacturing. There's a plant in Indiana today making Mercedes-Benz, a German car, and selling all the cars in China. Why? Because they're really good. They're highly productive, and they're really good, and they have lots of good technology. The things that matter now are the cost of the materials, the energy, which is why solar and wind power is so important, and the cost of transportation. The United States has the biggest consumer market in the world. Therefore, we should be able to make anything here if we make it in a smart, effective way and pay people good money doing it, and every job we create in manufacturing creates 2.5 other jobs in the rest of the economy. So Hillary wants to invest in that. Then we have to spend more money in science and technology so that all the people that graduate from this community college can get good jobs in a growing economy. And higher education has a bigger and bigger and bigger role to play. A congressman from California, now no longer in Congress, named Henry Waxman, in 1980 sponsored one of the great bipartisan bills ever sponsored, and President Carter signed that bill after he was defeated by then Governor Ronald Reagan in December of 1980. Here's what it says. If any university gets money from the national government in science and technology, and they make a discovery that has some value in the marketplace, commercial value, they can sell it, they can license it, or they can take a piece of a company, and any profits they make, they can keep as long as it's reinvested there in making more jobs out of science and technology. Now, where this is being done in America today, people are not hopeless. One of the reasons Hillary won Florida 2-1 is that in Orlando, which is normally a more conservative part of Florida, but is growing ever more diverse, they have 100 computer simulation companies. Why? You ever go to Disney World? Disney World, Universal Entertainment Park, they need computer simulators to make it interesting for you to come back a second time. So Global Entertainment Arts moved their video game division there. And NASA, the space agency, And the Defense Department spends $5 billion a year there. That's billion, not million, a year, because it is cheaper and safer to teach people to go up in a spaceship, fly a jet airplane, or drive a tank on a simulator than the real deal. As a result, this town that most of us think of is the place to go to Disney World has 100 of these companies, all spun out of the university, and the University of Central Florida is now the third biggest campus in America in one place after Michigan and Ohio State. Now, we can do that in California everywhere. Everywhere. We can do it everywhere in America. But to do it, you got to believe in a tomorrow economy, and you got to believe in cooperation, not conflict, and you can't turn people away at the door because you don't like their religion or their race or their whatever. You got to say, so, if we make the right investments, we'll do fine. The last thing I want to say is it's a big mistake to forget that 2/3 of the new jobs created in this country for 20 years have been in small business, and we've got to clarify the law relating to small business lending so these banks will loan money to small businesses again, and we can get the small business economy going. Now, those are her 5 points. Second big thing is you can do all that, and a lot of people will still be shut out. We can't go on being one of only 7 countries in the world with no paid leave. You cannot ask a family to choose between being good parents and good workers. So, California's got it. She wants a national increase in the minimum wage, paid leave, equal pay for women, and affordable child care. You do that, you'll get women back in the workforce. We'll all ride together. Second, and I believe this will be possible in the next Congress, we have got to quit these silly, counterproductive, totally political fights over immigration. We need to pass an immigration reform bill. And, you know, I hate to say it, that the way they behave, the other party, toward the Latino population, the Asian population, the Muslim population, is probably good politics for us, but it's not good for America. It's not good to have 11.5 million people here who are undocumented, who are working or in school, living with 5.5 million Americans, citizens, or people who are here with proper documentation, where every day somebody gets up worried sick, the kid's going to be kicked out of school, the families are going to be sent home and divided, and it's undermining our ability to develop our full potential. It's wrong. Every American should be for a sensible immigration reform package, and Hillary will make it a top priority to pass that. The third thing, then we need to look at other more discrete elements of our population that are having trouble. Veterans often have better training because of their military service than people do in some college programs or certain job training programs, but their unemployment rate is still above the national average. One reason is there have been so many rapid deployments over the years under such great stress that we have an unusual percentage of our younger veterans suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. So one of the first things Hillary did was to say, we're going to invest a lot more money in mental health treatment and support, but we've got to get these veterans in good jobs and make sure they're trained to do them. The same thing is true of the young people in America. There are far too many of them in prison for too long for nonviolent offenses. And she wants to let people who have been served too long for nonviolent offenses out of jail, but she knows there's no point in doing it unless you give them education, training, and the assurance that they will not be denied a job because they were once in jail, so we can all rise together again. The final thing I want to say about that is small town and rural America has the highest incidence of addiction to prescription drugs and heroin of any section of our country. We never had a drug problem like this that was so heavily concentrated there. And one of the reasons is that the economy is so much weaker in so much of small town and rural America. West Virginia has the second weakest economy in America and the highest rate of prescription drug and heroin addiction in the country. I was just in New Mexico. They have the second highest rate. And a lot of this is crazy. These places can have new economic opportunities. So you have to measure and match the mental health and treatment commitment with serious investments and incentives to places with unemployment rates above the national average, poverty rates above the national average. They can do everything there that can be done anywhere else. We just have to work to connect them to the rest of the American economy. And she is the only candidate with a clear, consistent plan to do that. So, now, so she got the best ideas. But the third reason you ought to be for is maybe the most important of all. There are two things that could derail our coming back up again, all the way up with shared prosperity. One is continued political gridlock in Washington, and the other is all this trouble around the world. In the last 3-month period, we get these statistics by quarter, the United States finally showed enough hiring that the labor markets were getting tight enough that wages for working people in the working class and middle class started rising again. That's the good news. The bad news is that our growth went down to 0.5% entirely because of all the anemic growth and economic and social turmoil in the rest of the world. If everybody else goes down, they'll hold us back. And if we rise, we'll bring them forward, not only out of the economic doldrums, but out of all these divisive social and political struggles that are tearing people up all over the world. She is the only person you can vote for. The only person you can vote for today who, because of her experience when I was president, because of her involvement with crisis situations then, because of her work on the Armed Services Committee in the United States Senate for 8 years, and because of what she did as Secretary of State, she can give us the safety and the space we need to grow so we can lift the world and lead the world away from a very destructive course. That's why every American should care about this. So, that's my pitch. Now, what's going on in this campaign is actually appearing right before your very eyes, but nobody wants to talk about it. I see all this stuff about, oh, well, people know she'd be the best president, but they don't know if they can trust her. There's a reason they think that. Because that's what the Republicans want them to think. Because they didn't want to run against her. And they did me exactly the same way. You have to be old enough to remember my campaign in 1992. When on June the 2nd, 1992, I won California and New Jersey and clearly had the votes to be nominated by the Democratic Convention. Whoa. I was also running third in the polls behind President Bush and Ross Perot. 3 weeks later, one of the San Francisco papers had a big article on the front page that said, Bush and Perot in tough race. Clinton, not a factor. They showed a map that said I had a grand total of 9 electoral votes. They were about 370 short. We're laughing. Why? Because I could fill this room with the psychological surveys that show if you badmouth people over and over and over again, even if nothing you ever say is true, it hurts you. And frankly, you got to be sympathetic with the media who covers it because it's really boring to talk about somebody who's good and doing good every day and getting things done. Whereas, if you could catch somebody doing. And think about the poor Republicans. Really, I feel bad for them. Their whole theory is that government would mess up a 2-car parade, right? I mean, that's their whole theory. So nothing threatens them more than somebody like Hillary, who's made something good happen in every position she's ever had. Both as Secretary of State, the Iran sanctions, the only nuclear agreement we made with anybody that we made with Russia that makes you a lot safer with all these tensions with Russia. She had to get 67 votes in the Senate to get that ratified. She got those votes, Republican votes. They liked her. They liked her when she got the Iran sanctions. They liked her when she flew across the world to make a deal with the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt to stop the shooting war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza. They liked her just fine. They liked her when she was on the Armed Services Committee and she worked with John McCain to get treatment for veterans coming home with traumatic brain injury. They liked her when she worked with Lindsey Graham to make sure that National Guards people and reservists, the men and women who served in the Guard and Reserve who were called up, when they came home, got the same health care benefits that regular military personnel did. They liked her fine. They liked her when she was the de facto economic officer for outside of New York City's area, New York, working with small farmers and manufacturers without regard to their party. When she ran for re-election, the Republican head of the Farm Bureau on Long Island endorsed her. And the press went breathlessly up to him and said, "Joe, I thought you were a Republican." He said, "I thought I was too." "Well, how can you endorse her?" He said, "I'll tell you why. I spend my life trying to help these farmers hang on to their farms. Everybody sounds good at election time, but when we elected her, she actually did something to help our farmers hang on to their farm. I am for her." So, the Republican House leader, Tom DeLay, liked her just fine when she went to him and said, "I know we don't agree on anything very much, but I don't care what you say about us. I know you adopted your children, and I honor you for it." And he said, "What's that got to do with anything?" She said, "Congressman, the foster care rolls in this country are exploding. And those children are just like yours. And they're going to age out. They're going to be thrown on the streets. They have no living supports. They have no education, no training, no way to get a job, no way to go forward. You can't let this happen. What do you want to do about it?" he said. She said, "Hey, you're a Republican. You love tax cuts. Let's give people a whopping tax cut if they'll adopt a non-infant child." People are afraid to do that. "Let's give them a bigger one if they'll adopt a child with special needs." They're afraid they can't afford that. Then you have to acknowledge that we do need some government to give the social supports to these families taking this chance, and some government to help these kids that are going to age out that we can't stop. All I had to do was sign the bill. It was an 80% increase in adoptions out of foster care because she always makes something good happen no matter what the political environment is. And we need that. We need that. So look, if I were 25 again, and I'd like to be, but that's like Make America Great Again. It ain't going to happen that way. But if I were, and I got one of those famous magic lanterns and a genie popped out and said, "Bill Clinton, I'll let you live anywhere you want to live in the world, anywhere in the world 30 years from now, but you have to decide right now," I'd pick America in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat. But whether the America I dream of for my grandchildren materializes is up to you. And I cannot overstate the importance of this election. We now know all the people that the Republican nominee says he'd think about putting on the Supreme Court. So that issue alone is enough to tell you who to vote for. If, like me, you believe we should expand and protect voting rights, not restrict them. If you believe we should protect labor rights, not gut them. If you believe we should protect women's rights and the rights of the LGBT community and the rights of Americans to go forward together, and we ought to get rid of that fool Citizens United decision that put a for sale sign on the door of American democracy. We don't have to be hateful to anybody. We don't have to do what they're doing and what they're saying. We just have to remember that this election is about you, your children, your grandchildren, and the future of this country. There is no place on earth more blessed in natural capacity. We rank first or second in the world in our ability to generate clean energy, for example. In human capacity because of the diversity and youth of our workforce. In capital as manifest in our science and technology base. But we have underinvested in our future, in infrastructure, energy, and a lot of other things. And we have wasted precious time with mindless battles designed to win short-term elections by making people, to go back to what Theodore Roosevelt said, hard in the heart and soft in the head. Now, there are reasons for people to be angry. The white working class in the Republican Party thinks they've been treated like a cheap date for 35 years. They say, you don't want to vote for the Democrats, look at them. They got so many. First it was the African Americans, and then it was for women's rights, and then we were for immigrant rights, and then we were for gay rights. And all along when they got in a close race, they'd say, oh, by the way, they're coming for your gun. Look, I was governor of Arkansas. We had to close high schools on the first day of deer season because nobody was going to show up anyway. But we passed the assault weapons ban and ammunition clip and the Brady bill because they could not convince those people I was coming for their gun. What I said was, please help us save all these innocent children's lives so we can go forward together. Please help us. Somebody needs. I knew Hillary wasn't going to win West Virginia because they were mad at the president and anybody that said they believed in climate change because they think that's why they don't have the jobs they used to have. But it really has more to do with natural gas and the Wyoming coal being cheaper to get out of the ground and having lower sulfur content and warmer weather and lots of other things. So I went down to see them. And every time they were booing me outside, I said, come on in and boo some more. I said, here's what I want to tell you. You're right to be mad that everybody's forgotten about you. So now you have a decision to make. I said, you're not just talking to anybody. I said, I'm the last president, I hope, who can say that as a boy I lived on a farm without indoor plumbing, so I don't have to listen to your lectures. I don't have to listen to that. I know why you're mad. And I do think the country has turned its back on you. And I do think you are invisible to too many people, but you're not invisible to Hillary. Remember, she's the first person that laid down a $30 billion plan to help to rebuild coal country and bring you back into the mainstream of American life. Now, you have a choice. If you'd really rather go back to the way it used to be, and you really think that's possible, have at it. She sent me down here to tell you one thing. No matter who you vote for, she sees you, and if she wins this election, we're coming back for you to take you along to the future. And that's what we've got to say to everybody. And you just have to decide. In the Democratic primary, these two candidates voted together 93% of the time in the Senate. When they disagreed, you won't surprise you to think that I thought Hillary was right. I think she was right to vote for the background, support background checks, and to oppose making big gun manufacturers the only big corporations in America that can't be sued for misconduct. I think, I don't think you have to be all broke out with brilliance to make that decision. It didn't have anything to do with taking anybody's gun away. I think she was right to vote for immigration reform when the farm workers in California were begging for it, and we had a president, George Bush, who was not afraid, bless his heart, to compete for Latino votes. And I think we missed a big opportunity there. But the main thing is, who can carry the load to get things done? When Governor Brown sent out his text message endorsing Hillary a couple of days ago, I was very grateful. But we had a talk about this minimum wage bill you passed, California. and how it was a combination of passionate progressivism, go to $15 an hour first in San Francisco and LA, and practical realities. Don't do it everywhere tomorrow. If you do, you'll have a lot of small businesses go broke, so phase it in over several years. That's what we need. We need somebody who can get something done. So I'll leave you with this thought. Here is the best endorsement speech for Hillary that I've heard given in this election season. 4 sentences long. From a man who was defeated as my senior senator from my native state of Arkansas in November of 2014 for voting for the health care bill. And he knew he would lose. And he voted for it anyway, so that the very people who voted against him, all these working class people, could insure themselves and their children for the first time. And he got up and said, look, I love being a senator. I hate to give this job up. But I can't live with myself if I keep it, because when I was a child, I had cancer on the back of my leg. I could easily have died before I became a teenager. But I lived, I grew up, I got to serve my state and my nation, and I had 2 children, and they're grown now. I could not deny that right to poor children by denying them the kind of health insurance coverage my father provided to our family, and I would rather give up my job than deny them that chance. So he said, I have a very strong opinion about this election. Here's the endorsement. I know both these candidates. I like them both, and I have served with them both. But if you want to get America moving again, you should make Hillary the President of the United States. Thank you, and God bless you.